case, sometimes you will see the hierarchy. And it's important to work from the top on the rethink and redesign, and then coming to the reduce, reuse, recycle. You all recognize this, I'm sure. On the right-hand side, I have, or for this side now, when you look at me from this side, is an arrow saying that you need to have holistic strategies, communication, sectoral approach, policy development, and green procurement to drive up to the top. And all the time, you should be aware of the hazardous content of anything that should be eliminated in any of these steps. So, because the future must be circular, we live on a finite planet, and we cannot use it the way we are doing at the moment and how we please. We need to think through. And as we are thinking through the materials, like said, we will actually also reduce carbon emissions. So the goal is to aim for no waste, no pollution, and then of course also minimize the virgin material usage. Many times in a circular economy, you also look at local, regional distribution and collaborations, so that you don't have to have too much of logistics either going on, because of course that will mean transports and emissions and energy going. Renewable energy is part of the package to try to get into it, and also all in all then reducing the CO2s in all of that. Just one number, because I don't want to spam you with that, but in the building sector, it is said to be possible to reduce up to 61% of the material-related greenhouse gas emissions across a building's life cycle. So now this tells us that it's important that we just don't build however, and don't plan for how we can maintain and repair the building, and then later on tear it down potentially. Hopefully we could use and reuse parts of it, etc., so that we can save. And since I'll send the presentation for you guys, if you want to send it out, I've done some links so that you can just continue reading about this. So one of the things that we do, our LCA, the life cycle analysis, is on different products, on different processes, on different services, to see actually how much emissions is coming, if it's virgin or if it's recycled or if it's reused many times, etc. It's quite intricate and it's very specific for each and every product, but it's coming along quite well, and us and many more are doing these. So more and more official data is available, which makes it easier for us to also then prove for ourselves and for the authorities, maybe if you're a company that needs the data to prove that we are actually reducing the emissions. One of the big platforms selling second-hand goods, everything from clothes to houses to you name it, is called Blocket in Sweden. And we did some calculations for them. And every year, we actually saved 1.6 million tons of GHG emissions, which is quite remarkable. We're a tiny country, actually. So for countries that would have even larger population, I'm imagining they will save much more if they use Blocket or something similar the way we do here. So focusing on production and consumption is quite natural when we see the benefits of it. And how can we do that? Well, it's the design, like said, durability, reparability, recyclability, upgradability, and the material choices, the extraction methods. You go through all of that. And then, of course, the consumption part, where the green procurement, fossil-free, circular, etc., is coming on more and more. in the world. It needs a lot of standards, unity, traceability, where digital tools can be of service, which is good. We're in 2024, so that should be used. Reuse of what is already on the market, etc. But most of all, I think it's an attitude shift and also coming up with good examples, because we are copycats as human beings. It feels safe to do something that someone else has done, instead of being the explorer, doing the trailblazer and doing everything. Some of us are interested in being that and are passionate about it, but most people, and we need a lot of people to do this, they need some good examples to look up to and be inspired by and guided by. So that is also, that's why we started something called the procurement panel. And it is all in English, the information there. You have an option of English. So there's a lot on public procurement and how to work on that to make it fossil free and circular. For anyone who knows anyone in a governmental office or serving anyone in a governmental office as delivering services or products. Also, of course, there's a lot of information. You all know this site, I hope, Ellen MacArthur, where you can learn so much about circularity and the benefits of it. Like I said, we have a lot of needs of solutions, and I heard mentioned in the previous, of course, general education and knowledge capacity building is needed in all kinds of ages and also sectors. I see we often tend to say the younger generation should learn, but I am of a strong opinion that my generation should implement immediately, because we cannot say that we don't know. But a lot of people are a bit ignorant on these matters, and then we need to capacity build ourselves and take action, because we cannot leave it for the younger generation to fix whatever we are actually doing bad right now. Research and innovation, obviously. Legislative incentives are needed, and market sensitization, product and consumption. Okay, so I'm going to skip through. Do we have any questions? I'm sorry, I'm just hitting you with.
Yeah, sure. There's a question, but then
okay.
I was hoping that perhaps you finish and then we get into the questions.
Okay, so I'll skip through some. If you will all get this later, I'm thinking. So partnerships, of course, always essential, and some practical examples of how to do the circular business models, trying to be a bit systematic about it. And then thinking in service management instead of only product management, like how can we deliver this product as a service maybe, and also in the big part of society, the energy systems, the water systems, the resources of all kinds, and taking care of waste heat in society, turning it into something good instead of just wasting it, etc. Some examples of product as a service will be served for you, because if we reuse, obviously we don't need to produce new, and we can have an economy built on this instead of the normal linear one. Maybe you have some hidden organic gems in your hometowns that are mixed right now with other waste instead of being utilized for very good purposes, and to be able to harness the methane if you would do it, if you would do digestion with biogas, and also bioslurry as a product. Those are like the easiest way to start something circular that will actually make a difference also for the climate and for your soil restoration. And you could also use the biogas to dry some produce, for instance, or do other things. CIH, the Circular Innovation Hub, is in Nairobi. Some of you might know about it. They have also lots of capacity building being done. But it is challenging it's easy to get stuck in tech innovation, especially when we see that funding goes a lot to that, but we can use them, like I said. But we need to emphasize on the people in this and look at potential carbon offset, but basically start with the strategies and the roadmap towards how we're going to do this and who wants to lead this and when and how, so that we can save Mother Earth together. Thank you. That was
Oh,
my.
amazing, amazing. That's quite a great presentation and well explained
I
with a
hope
lot
you.
of insights for us to further get to build upon and see on ways on which we could collaborate and get to work together even further. And so perhaps my first question will just be, how do you see Africa's transition to a green economy unfolding, especially in terms of the research and innovation spaces?
I've 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 recognized more traction for it, definitely. I
Okay.
know not only for us, but in general, when you sort of move around in this bubble and listen in a lot. So both investment wise and research wise, more and more is coming, and data is really sought for. So that's why also the research is being demanded. And we also see collaborations with other institutes, or like think SDG 17, where we should work across the globe and enhance and better everything. That is also a lot of those kind of funds to leapfrog the research and the benefits of developing in the whole of Africa, let's say then. It's a huge continent, of course, but so the opportunities goes in different ways in different countries. Yeah.
And perhaps having mentioned about the issue on traction, building up and the more people becoming interested in venturing in the space, my question will be to Mr. Patrick Carrier, that what are some of the innovative solutions that are emerging from Kenya and the wider continent that could propel the region towards a green economy?
Uh, yeah, thank you so much for that question. I think according to what Simon said, there is emerging things that we should do in Africa, like the Takataka initiative. I think that's part of the recycling. We need to talk with these companies that use plastics, or either hotels that use the plastics. At least they can come up with an idea that can help. We don't use the normal things that they use, but to use recyclable things.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you so much. And I'll go back to Simon and just ask about the issue on recycling of the electronic equipment, because it has been quite a conflicting aspect, because most of these equipment that then come into the African space at times don't meet the standards, the global standards, because when we look at the issues around the ozone protection, the ozone layer protection, where we have the hydrofluorocarbons, we have the the HFCS, and they need to then phase them out. But then we get to realize that some of the equipment that come through the borders and within the continent and are still getting used don't really get to meet these standards. So what could be done to ensure that this information then reaches everyone so that the recycling and the adoption of the circular economy is more efficient?
Thank you. Yeah, that's a huge question, and luckily it's many people working on it, hopefully reaching some sort of solution very soon. But it's a network of events and responsibilities. And one thing, sometimes people stare and it's like, well, we don't have the budgets. Okay, well, or we don't have the legislation, or we don't have the coordination. And sometimes it's the basics, we don't have the knowledge. But what I see is that one thing is from Europe's side, since I'm sitting in Stockholm now in Sweden, there are a lot of restrictions being discussed and also implemented on what is allowed to be exported, how is it going to be, because it's one thing to have a law, and then how are you going to implement it, or how are you going to, from the authority side, make sure it is actually effectuated. So it's also the customs having controls in different ways. So, and to enhance the traceability, there are also, for instance, something like the digital product passports to follow different products so that you can know where they are and where they come from and whether they, all the different features for them. But yes, so that is one thing, like the restrictions of exporting something that isn't of good quality, or that actually, when you've done some life cycle analysis, maybe it's much more beneficial to recycle it on site after a certain amount of years instead of sending it away, even though it might be used for 2 years more or something like that. But, so that's also how we can use the data to see, okay, this fridge or computer, whatever, could be used a little bit longer, but maybe it's actually more beneficial to keep it here if we need to send it too far off, especially if the systems of disposal and recycling are not well developed to where we are sending it. Then it's even more beneficial to take care of it in a safe manner, so we don't send out like the GHG problem or ozone depleting substances. Yeah, so that is one thing. But then each African country needs to, and are some of them working on these roadmaps and seeing how to prioritize this. So it needs to be prioritized, and it needs to be emphasized in terms of seeing business opportunities in it instead of continuing the way they've always done, because otherwise nobody will put the money there so that the industry can start growing and become more safekeeping in terms of these matters. So, yeah.
Well,
Maybe
just building on that, we would also like to hear from Mr. Patrick Carrier on how then can the cross-sector collaboration that we've just mentioned and the need for it, particularly between the governments and the private sector and even the local communities, accelerate the transition to a low carbon economy?
Yeah, I think like what Simon have said, I think Africa has immense renewable resources, including abundant sunlight, wind, and so many things that I think significantly it can play a very big role on what he said. Yeah, according to the question that you said, you asked me, I think it's very important for circular economy to be given like a kind of blueprint, which can play a very big role to the African society or to the African government in one way or the other.
Well, and Mr. Patrick, having said that, you earlier on mentioned about some of these entities like the Takataka entity, a startup that is focusing on recycling some of the wastes, and maybe just how has it been reporting on some of the issues that these startups partake of, and what has been the perception of your audiences on these matters?
Yeah, the Takataka guys or whoever taking those wastes, they are very important people, but in one way or the other, I think they need the government inclusivity to play a role so that it can happen or it can work well toward them.
Okay, thank you so much for that contribution. And maybe my last question to Simone will be, what role can circular economy practices play in ensuring sustainable growth for the African nations?
Thank you. Yeah, I would repeat a little bit from my very quick presentation then. There are several really practical circular business models and ideas that are already being shown to work, some of them in the African society. And now I know saying African society is still a continent. So in each country, you need to look at what is the culture and how do people work. But in general, to be able to offer products and maybe make it into a service where you rent it out for a period of time, or is nothing strange, because you are also used to having a lot of handicraft people to come and help you, the fundis. So I think here in Sweden, labor is very expensive. So we have sort of the tradition of we usually do everything ourselves. So we buy all the tools ourselves also to be able to do these things. You are in a better position to actually accept having a service of people coming to offer you to do this for you. So formalizing that instead of it being an informal market, I think is one huge leap forward. And that includes the whole circularity, not only doing services, of course, it's also taking care of the waste management in different steps that needs to be more formalized, because that will also ensure more of the traceability, use of more modern tools, etc. So I think that is parts that needs to be worked on. What do you think?
Well, what I'll say is that henceforth from now, we really need to emphasize the need for collaboration, because I'll just refer to the aspect that you mentioned earlier on, the need for knowledge and the important role of knowledge in this section, because we are entering into the circular economy, and perhaps it's a new thing, for most of the countries, while you can find that in other countries, it's something that has been built on and they have undergone the challenges and they're able to even navigate their way around it.
Yeah.
But then for the countries that it's a first approach towards the circular economy, there needs to be more emphasis on the knowledge aspect and the capacity building aspect, so that even the startups that are coming up with some of the solutions are able to be taken through some of the more efficient means of which they could partake of in recycling most of the products that we get to use on a daily basis.
Mm.
And maybe we'll just listen to Mr. Patrick Carrier for more, maybe because we don't have time, has been offering reports on a global scale, and perhaps they've engaged with some of these startups and they've engaged with some of these programs. Maybe you can just give us a final detail on the way forward for Africa, especially to achieve a win in this journey. Unmute, sir.
I think everyone should be part of us. We work with all solutionists and experts. So in one way or the other, if you are innovative person, if you are innovative organization, if you are recyclable organization, I think we give that opportunity to all people from the global. And I think if you can be part of us, then we can walk the journey together and we see what we can achieve, not only for you, but for the global world. That's my word.
Well, thank you so much for that contribution. And you could share your details and maybe email on a way we could reach you in the chat. And same to Mrs. Anderson. Thank you so much for joining us this evening for the discussion. And you could also share your email and a way in which you could reach you, and maybe also share the PowerPoint so that some of the participants could have a look at it. And for further details, we could continue engaging. And that brings us to the close of our session. So I would like to thank everyone for being a part of this incredible 2-day webinar that was deemed the Africa's Pathway to Climate Change, Adaptation and Mitigation. I believe it has been an enriching and insightful experience for you participants as well, with thought-provoking discussions and a great deal of shared expertise from the distinguished speakers and panelists whom we've engaged with since day one, that was yesterday. And just to reflect on some of the key themes, we've explored key areas such as Africa's green economy, climate smart agriculture, and majorly we've looked into how then we could use the innovative technologies to advance some of these sustainable solutions. The conversations around COP29 and Africa's expectations have been critical, and as we gear up for COP29 that will be starting earlier on next week, we would like to believe that the priorities of Africa are well articulated, and as we go for the meetings and the convention, we look forward to coming out with better results that can then be built upon and well implemented to bring the change that we seek as the African continent and even the global at the global scale. Because as we all know, climate action has to be a collective action in that all of us have a role to play and all of us need to be entirely included. And just as we conclude, I would like to remind us that Switch Media is collaborating with We Don't Have Time, and this collaboration will see the live streaming of the proceedings during the COP29. Yeah, that is under the United Nations Framework on Climate Change Convention. So you can stay tuned via Switch Media during the COP29 briefings, as they will also be offering you the live streams on the crucial climate meeting conversations, and you could also be able to take a part into such. Other than that, I'll just tell us that we look forward to future collaborations amongst us, the participants, the organizations that have been engaged, and even the initiatives that have been shared about. We could also find a way of which we could have an impact or even contribute into some of these initiatives as we look forward to having a better planet and averting some of these climate change impacts that we are faced with globally. Thank you so much, and together let's build an African future that lies in a green, resilient, and inclusive economy. Thank you for being a part of this discussion.
Thank you so much. That was very nicely rounded off. Take care, everyone.